Well, thanks, Mayor. Thanks for joining us. I do want to talk about the Trump administration, the threats to withhold money for CPS, more than $1 billion over DE&I issues, and you've said you would sue if that happened. What is the status of this, and what does CPS have to do to make sure that they get that federal money that they're owed?
Yeah, well, look, the city of Chicago, we contribute, billions of dollars to the federal government as taxpayers, right? So I'm going to continue to fight hard to make sure that we receive the return of our investment. It's critical to the vibrancy and the life and the soul of Chicago. What I've also been very clear about, we're going to do everything necessary to fight this administration as it attacks working people. And all of our options have to remain on the table. We have to organize, we have to legislate, we have to invest and take legal actions if necessary, because what we do know is everything that he's doing right now is clear that he does not believe in the sensibility of our democracy. He has literally just dismissed the Constitution, right? Even what he's proposing, allegedly proposing, by dismantling of the Department of Education. He doesn't have the authority to do that, but this president doesn't care. It's the same person who freed January 6ers. He's more concerned about protecting his extreme base, the interests of the ultra wealthy, than actually supporting working people. But that's why I've been very clear about investing in our public education system, the schools that all of our children deserve. We are obviously in that position now to secure that, and we're going to do everything necessary to protect it.
To protect that $1 billion, you mentioned investing in education, which dovetails into the contract, which we expect the CTU will vote on Monday. All signs pointing that they'll approve this contract. CPS leaders say it's going to cost $1.5 billion over the next 4 years. They say they're paying for it this year. The next few years are a little fuzzy. They said if they had agreed to the initial asks from CTU, it would have been $10 billion. Given that, and given your differences with CEO Pedro Martinez, is it fair to say he held the line for taxpayers while delivering a fair contract?
Well, look, this is what parents have longed for in the city of Chicago. Class sizes that are smaller and manageable. That's good especially for our kindergartners, right? That's something that we didn't have before. The educational outcomes that are attached to having smaller class sizes, that's something that I have called for as a teacher, as an organizer, as a parent who sends my children to our public schools. We also have a commitment to ensure that we're expanding sustainable community schools. I wish all of our schools would be part of the Sustainable Community Schools model. This is a model where neighborhoods work with the neighborhood to secure additional resources to respond to the unique needs of that particular school. Dyett High School is a good example of a sustainable community school. Here's a school that was set for closure. I fought against that, against the Rahm Emanuel administration, and now a decade later, that school has produced champions. That's a big deal in this contract. So sustainable community schools, having class sizes that are smaller. The other element that is incredibly important for parents is that we have now doubled the amount of resources for arts and music and extracurricular activities for our sports, right? We have children who are low income can now go to field trips that was not possible before. And so what we have is a reflection of my values. We have a reflection of what parents need, and the cost of that certainly reflect, the overall fiduciary responsibility that we have to secure an education system that every single child in the city of Chicago deserves.
And you brought up sustainable community schools. I know this is a big passion for you and part of your plank for CPS. But there was a study from the Illinois Policy Institute, and consider this source. They are pretty against unions in their disposition, but they quoted Board of Education data saying that the sustainable community schools actually performed worse than the CPS average when it came to test scores, when it came to student attendance. How do you improve those outcomes? I mean, is this a sign that maybe this model has not produced what you want it to?
This model has produced exactly what the people of Chicago have called for. Byler Elementary on the west side of Chicago was set for closure. We protected and saved that school. It's now a sustainable community school where the neighborhood gets to participate in the overall outcome and the direction of this particular school, and is one of our top performing schools in the city of Chicago. Of course, you're going to have a right-wing extreme group that wants to minimize the progress, particularly for poor children. And so here's what I'm committed to doing, is to ensure that every single child has access to a publicly funded, well-funded neighborhood school with class sizes that are small, right? The Sustainable Community Schools model that really allows for local participation, non-for-profits, business, faith, to all come together to respond to the unique needs that these school communities have. We also have a commitment to grow our after-school programs while also increasing opportunities for children to have music and art. These are the things that the people of Chicago have longed for. And so I was able to effectively bring forces together to respond to the needs of people, and the city of Chicago is leading the way as we ensure that our public schools are fully funded, particularly at a time in which the federal government has shown so much animus against our public education system. We're going to continue to fight back against the Trump administration and ensure that every single child in Chicago has exactly what they deserve.
And you brought up Diet High School. You went on hunger strike to save Diet High School. You mentioned they just won a state championship in basketball. It's an amazing story. But on the academic side, the numbers are still troubling there. 4.5% of students reading at grade level, less than 1% math, chronically high absenteeism. How is this effectively serving the kids in that community if these are the outcomes right now?
Look, the neighborhood schools that we are investing in are attached to the desires and needs of families. Now, look, there are going to be folks who are going to pick apart data points. Look, here's what's most important. In order for children to succeed in this city, we have to invest in them. And if anybody is calling for the divestment or defunding of our public education system, they're no different than Donald Trump. And so do we take the standard of Donald Trump or those who believe that we should defund our public education system? Do we use their standard as a matrix? Absolutely not. What we're going to use as a matrix are the demands and the desires of working people. And what working people want in this city is a school district that works for every single child, class sizes that are manageable, making sure that our Sustainable Community Schools model expands, because what we've seen by previous administrations, school privatization, turnarounds that really harmed our children because it attacked working people in this city. We have shifted away from that model. This is an investment model that speaks to the demands of working people, and especially our parents, right? And I know that in a very intimate way. As a parent who sends my children to our public schools, what I want for my children, I want for every single child in this city. And that's what we're securing. The city of Chicago, conservatively, we help support our school district in the tune of about $1.2 billion. We're going to continue to work together to ensure that our schools are fully funded, because every single child needs access to not just those small class sizes, but our special education students, where in certain schools, 30% of the school population are children who have IEPs. That's why in this contract, there are 400 additional teachers' assistants that will be intimately involved in the overall outcome of our children.
Is it on you, is it on the school board to improve those outcomes, those metrics I mentioned, absenteeism, reading scores, math scores?
Of course, that's all a part of all of our collective responsibility.
And will this contract help get that
Of course it is,
accomplished?
because class sizes actually do matter. There is no other mayor in the history of Chicago that has more of an intimate relationship with schools. I taught in these classrooms, not these so-called think tanks. I send my children to these schools, not these so-called think tanks. These are the same individuals that were cheering on previous administrations when they were shutting down schools, laying off teachers, particularly black and brown women. They had nothing to say when school privatization proved to be financially irresponsible. And now when we have an opportunity to actually achieve a school district that reflects the interests of families and working people, now all of a sudden they're experts. They're not. They're fraudulent. They don't have the level of expertise and connection to these communities. They never have, they never will, and they're not interested in it. And that's why, as a parent, as a teacher, and now as mayor of the city of Chicago, we have delivered on the hopes and aspirations of working people. Schools that have class sizes that are smaller, that's a win for parents. Schools that invest in art and music, that's a win for parents. Schools that have a commitment to having more social workers and counselors, that's a win for parents. Making sure that we're protecting our veteran teachers. Think about what's happening at the federal level, where the Trump administration is attacking seniority, going after public employees. This contract actually secures and supports working people. Here's the other thing that this contract does. It protects Black history. We can actually teach it. The Trump administration doesn't want us to teach it. We also protect the LGBTQ plus community, our students, right? No matter who you are, you get to have access to a high quality public education. That's what parents voted for, and that's what they're going to experience in this agreement.
I want to take the bigger picture view of this process because there were so many twists and turns along the way. You know, in general, you've got the Chicago Teachers Union, which is a very politically successful and powerful movement. It's the movement you came out of. And do you appreciate skepticism from residents over the appearance that they were trying to control both sides of this negotiation by, you know, getting board members appointed that were very friendly to them, by even, as CEO Martinez had said, going above him and trying to work with the board members? The concerns, do you appreciate the concerns of taxpayers that the union maybe held too much power in this process?
This is about the parents. This is about the people who voted for me. Look, I didn't negotiate that contract. I brought people together so that folks understood how close they were. This is about a vision for our schools and what it means to have a mayor who understands that vision, right? Again, if you think about just the long history of our public education system, the ongoing fights, you know, whether it's, you know, the 1987 strike, you know, Jackie Vaughn and Harold Washington, the longest strike in the history of Chicago. Whether it's the Willis wagons, where families were stuffed into these mobiles because the system wasn't committed to ensuring that we actually have class sizes that are small and you have a full investment. You think about the closures of schools. For the first time in 15 years, you actually have labor peace. Look, I brought calm and structure to this moment. Now, all the chaos that I inherited, I take full responsibility for this moment that we're in now. But we have level set. And the people of Chicago counted on me to speak to their values and their interests. And that's what we did. Now you have 5- and 6-year-olds that can learn in classrooms that are not stuffed at the margins. Now you have, you know, young people who are on free and reduced lunch, you know, can actually now go to field trips and they don't have to worry about whether or not they'll be able to afford them. Right now you have a contract that is committed to growing our access to the trades for our young people. You know, we've secured just last year alone $11 billion of new development, of which 37,000 construction jobs will be made available through these developments. And now we're creating a pathway for our young people to be able to have access to those jobs. That's a good thing for people of Chicago. That's what they've longed for. And so this contract is really just a codification of the things that we have longed for in this city. And now that we have labor peace, we have a commitment to ensuring that not only working people are protected, because this is the most pro-worker city in America, and I'm very proud of that. And parents support these measures as well. Nobody wants to be unsure about whether or not they're going to have a job day to day. Do you know what that's like to send your child to a school and you're not quite sure if the teacher that your previous child had, that your next child's going to have? There's some continuity there that we have secured. And whether it's protecting our senior teachers, making sure that poor children can go to field trips, and ensuring that smaller schools have access to more resources just so that they can attend their after-school activities. There were young people who could not attend an away game because a local principal could not afford a bus. We've fixed that. 400 more teachers' assistants that can work with these young people, that can really design curriculum to help them grow and mature. This is something that is not going to solve all of our societal problems, but it certainly moves us in the right direction. And Chicago is leading the way, particularly at a time when the federal government is literally dismantling public education all over the country. The city of Chicago is holding firm to our values.
Is there anything you regret about this process? Because it did get so messy and there were so many different hiccups along the way.
Well, look, it's Chicago, right? It's part of our democratic process. You know, look, I would have loved to be able to secure even more sustainable community schools because it is a model that's working. It really is. And if you ask those students in those local school communities how much they appreciate the sustainable community school model, or you have schools that are working with behavior and mental health related services to provide those additional services into our schools, the level of trauma that our young people are experiencing every single day, or working with other organizations that can help beautify the community as well as learn a trade throughout that process. This is the type of innovation that we're bringing to our education system in this new century of development. And of course, you know, when you're working to transform a system that has just demonstrated a great deal of animus against working people, sometimes people struggle to make that shift. But that's why leadership matters. I brought people together. We have labor peace. And there are actual real wins in this contract that protects Black history. It protects the LGBTQ plus community. It protects veteran teachers, overwhelmingly women. This profession is made up of 87%, I believe, women. Right? Of course, people are going to go through this process with a fine-tooth comb. Right? There's more interest in this contract than the contract with the Chicago Police Department.
There
right?
was. There got more coverage, obviously.
You know, and listen, I don't begrudge that. I'm just simply saying that at a time in which women are being attacked, at a time in which the LGBTQ plus community is being attacked, at a time in which Black folks are going through these attacks, that we have protected diversity. We have protected equity. This is one of the most inclusive contracts that we've ever experienced in the history of Chicago, and that's what parents fought for. Those parents that were out protesting against previous administrations, they didn't have to protest this time. Those teachers that had to take a strike vote just to make sure that their voices were heard, they didn't have to do that this time. No, was it perfect? No. But did we calm the storm? Absolutely we did.
Can you take, speaking of the storm, because a lot of it was kind of personal between you and CEO Pedro Martinez.
No, there's nothing personal between
Well, can you take me into that meeting last summer where he says that you asked him to resign?
I didn't. It's just that simple. And here's the thing, it's not about Pedro. It's about the families of this city. I've never made this personal about me. I've always made it about centering it around working people in this city, making sure that our teachers are respected. Yes, I know what it's like to be a teacher. That's not a liability. That's a compliment. Yes, I'm a parent that has a vested interest in our public schools. That's not a liability. That's a compliment. It's always been about our workforce. It's always been about our children. It's always been about our families. And that's what it will remain, as far as I'm concerned. Because the biggest threat that we are experiencing right now is that we have a tyrant in the White House who doesn't believe in the very values in which we are lifting up in the city of Chicago. We're going to continue to lead the way because the schools that all of our children deserve is something that we have hoped for in this city for a very long time. And now we're a lot closer to that full experience than we've ever been.
And can you take me into that meeting last month that got a little contentious, where you said, just close this down, close this up, you're closed.
Yeah, look, I think most people probably know me as a pretty mild-mannered individual, and I try to hold to that disposition as a middle child. But, you know, look, this is what I said. We got to get it done. For the people of Chicago, we have to get this deal done. And, you know, I'll just leave it at that because we got it done.
So you'll let the rest speak for itself.
Well, I mean, look, you know, I think most people know that, you know, there's certain, you know, characteristics that I have that don't necessarily match, you know, other mayors. I believe you can be just as effective at getting your message across without using provocative language. And I will just say that I maintained my composure in that regard. But yes, it speaks for itself. I brought people together because that's what's necessary in this moment, that no other mayor has ever been properly situated to do what we were able to do together. And even though it was a little rocky along the way, no strike authorization vote, parents didn't have to go to the streets and take days off just to convince the mayor of Chicago or Chicago Public Schools to do right. So in other words, I made a promise that I was going to lead in this moment to ensure that the school system that all of our children deserve, the school district that I believe the entire city of Chicago can get around, that we've delivered on that. Small class sizes. You know, we have, you know, spaces within our schools now that can address some of the trauma that people are experiencing. We have a commitment between Chicago Public Schools and the city of Chicago to connect families to resources like housing and other support services, jobs. So now you have systems that are working together instead of being at odds with one another. That's the leadership that I brought to this moment. That's the leadership that I bring to Chicago. And I'm very proud that we were able to settle a contract, and I know there's still a democratic process where the members have to vote on it as a whole, but all signs are pointing towards that we will be able to deliver a contract that works for the working people of this city.
Okay, Mayor Johnson, that's my time. Thank you so much.
You're
really
welcome.
Appreciate you spending this time with us.
You got it, of course.
All right. Good seeing you.
All the best.
You as well.
Thank you.